I'd like to call the Legislative Committee to order. And at this time, I want to say welcome to everyone here today, our board. Appreciate your attendance at our committee meeting. Always very important to be a part of it. At this time, I'm going to ask for a legislative update from our Director of Policy and Government Affairs and Josh Waller. Josh, it's your time. Up and at it.
It's my time. All right. We have a lot of different kind of meetings this time of year. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and the full board. Glad to be able to be here today, give you this presentation, sort of this post-crossover day, pre-sine die update on the General Assembly. So we'll jump in there. Here's just the key points. We'll look at the calendar real fast, and then three topics, four bills. First one's the update on truck weights, the active version of the truck weights bill. Then we'll talk about the EV bills, the House and Senate versions, and then another bill dealing with freight and logistics. You know, we've talked a lot about the work of the past couple of years on freight and logistics, and so it's sort of turned into this bill, and we'll talk through that. So first, the calendar, we can see we are today is at March the 15th is day 34. One more legislative day tomorrow, 3 legislative days next week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Some committee days sprinkled in there. Those are the ones in blue. And then you get to day 39 on March the 27th, committee day on that Tuesday, and then sine die on Wednesday, March the 29th. So we are in the short rows of the session when things get all the more interesting. And so we'll probably see a lull in bills that are passing, and then we'll see them ramp back up again as we get closer and closer to sine die. A few things of note since the last time this committee's met. We had crossover day, which is that day that bills have to pass. Items of note, that crossover day is when they pass the amended fiscal year budget, which the treasurer will present and walk through the details of that. But that got sent to the governor. That got sent to the governor on crossover day, as well as one of the EV bills passed on crossover day. So we had a lot of legislation that we were keeping an eye on that Monday. So jumping into the truck weights bill, House Bill 189, it passed the House on crossover day by a margin of 3 votes. It passed with 93 votes. And had been 3 shy, it would not have passed. It did make some changes from the underlying bill. The underlying bill allowed for a 12.5% variance onto what is the cap of 80,000 pounds, which brought it to 90. The substitute version brought it to 88, so it's a 10% variance. Few things of note, and the differences between 90,000 and 88, it did reduce the number of posted bridges. So under 90,000, it was about a 1,450 plus additional bridges, but it didn't reduce the number of posted bridges by much. So at 10%, it's 1,217 bridges that would be posted, additional posted on top of there are already 14, not to get confused with the numbers, but there's already 1,400 posted bridges without this bill, and so this would add another 1,217 onto that, as well as shortening pavement life and just that increased impact from the additional weight. Another thing of just note, because everyone thinks about the big tractor trailer trucks, so this version of the bill also allows for the utilization of a lift axle. That lift axle would mean you could carry higher weights on dump trucks, so smaller combination vehicles would also carry weights, and that contributes almost half of the additional postings of the 1,217 thereabouts. So these are the items. One of the things that's been talked about by particularly the proponents of the bill, that it's very limited in terms of the products that are allowed to go to 88,000. But I would note this is what's in there today: solid waste, chicken waste, forestry products, granite, raw ore or any mineral, feed, live poultry, construction aggregates. And undefined, they added this one explicitly, undefined agricultural farm product. And so that's in the transportation title. If you look in the transportation title, those terms are not defined. So what would fit an agricultural term under our code section? We're not sure. It could be kind of broad. So the bill passed the House. It's in the Senate. It's had a hearing in Senate Transportation at 7 a.m. yesterday, I think. Yeah, it's sort of blending in right now. So yesterday morning at 7 a.m., it was a hearing only, and there was a substitute amendment offered that would add even more products. They didn't take action, but so this is what is proposed on the table, adding intermediate and finished forest products, agricultural inputs, floor coverings, synthetic turfs, petroleum-based gasoline or diesel fuel, and soil concrete, cement, lime, asphalt, stone, or aggregates. So that would be on top of the bullet, just above that, if that amendment were to be adopted. So we know that there's scheduled another Transportation Committee meeting next Monday, so we'll keep everyone updated on that agenda and actions on that. I guess, Madam Chair, before I go to the next, are there any questions on?
So I'm curious, we have a list of products that can be hauled at this new weight. Can you give one or two examples of products that cannot be hauled at this weight?
I would have to really think hard about that.
Sounds like they covered everything in here, is my point,
Yeah.
most everything.
Particularly if you think about products that are dense enough where they can get to that point. Because you got a lot of products that their density is, you would have to really work hard to get that much weight onto the truck. You know, the other thing that got brought up in the committee yesterday was just with some of these products, and again, none of these products are containerized, so it's in an open truck, is the, you know, stacking, like with timber. I mean, that was raised by one of the senators at the meeting, is concern about the safety and then vehicles tipping over when they're getting to this legal weight. So, you know, it was and certainly I'll follow up with a link to that committee meeting, but going back and watch it, it was definitely some interesting conversation and trying to think through the safety impacts of the bill.
And one last question, in the agriculture area, is livestock, like horses, cattle, swine, is that in any of these categories, or was that even an issue?
I guess the farm product now could be
The undefined?
You would probably fit that into that term, because again, Title 32, which is our code, the department's code section, transportation code section, it's not like Department of Ags. That term is not defined in our title, and typically you have to define the term in the title if you're going to narrow it down. So
Thanks.
Ms. Lemon?
So, Josh, it passed in the House, what are we thinking about the Senate version? Is it likely to pass in the Senate?
So this version we're waiting to see. You know, we've seen some expression of concern from committee members, but until they actually either make a motion to vote or not, we won't know. So if it passes the Senate Transportation Committee, and with these modifications, with any modification, slightest modification, it passes Senate Transportation, then it has to go through Senate rules, and then to the floor, and then if it passes, it would then have to go back to the House again. So we're just waiting to see kind of what, you know, we certainly continue to express concerns and walk through with members, provide them detailed information on locations of these posted bridges, the budgetary impact to pavements and bridges, what would be required to replace and maintain, doing everything we can to help them understand the impacts of this bill so they can make the best policy decision possible.
And you're sending that to the Senate Transportation Committee members?
Correct.
Should we be sending this to our respective delegation Senate members?
Certainly, yeah, we've been sharing beyond the committee, but certainly if we can get the same information to each board member, if you would like to distribute that out.
I would like to.
I think that would be great if you would, and the sooner that perhaps you could do that would be good.
We'll do that.
All right, Mr. Boswell?
Josh, and I'm sure after this, have they taken into consideration what it's going to cost us,
Right.
or the taxpayers, as far as the DOT, as far as...
I think there's been some acknowledgement of that's going to have a cost in terms of
the possibility of injury or collapse on everything else
Correct.
we're having to go through.
I mean, all those things have been actively talked about. I know there's been discussion about trying to find ways to fund it, but there's been no funding mechanism, as far as I can tell, that's been identified to do
It's
that.
more of a safety issue, even than a funding issue.
Yeah, and that certainly that was raised as well. Was the impact yesterday in particular? Was the public safety was there, and they commented on their capacity to enforce, because again, motor carrier compliance. These trucks, they can't be, the only entity authorized to enforce that is Department of Public Safety motor carrier compliance. Local law enforcement is prohibited from enforcing these truck weight laws in state code. They're prohibited from doing that. And they talked about how they've got 220 to 250 maybe motor carrier compliance officers for the whole state, and a good significant portion of them are in the interstates enforcing interstate weights at the weigh stations. So, I mean, I think all those points have been brought to light, and I think that's probably in the consideration of those in particular that aren't expressing their opposition to the bill.
Thank you.
Any additional questions about House Bill 189 substitute over in the Senate? Seeing none, continue.
All right, next, talk about the electric vehicle charging legislation. There's two bills, very similar. House Bill 406, introduced by Chairman Rick Jaspers, and Senate Bill 146, introduced by Majority Leader Steve Gooch. Both bills kind of set a regulatory framework for electric vehicle charging stations. So that's the focus of this bill, is the charging stations. It requires them to get permits. It establishes safety and measuring guidelines, and establishes the Department of Agriculture, similar to what they do today in terms of gasoline pumps, will be the entity that oversees and does that enforcement and inspection and testing. That's very similar between the two bills. They both affirm what's actually in existing law, which when you think about motor fuel tax, constitutional motor fuel tax, and how it has to be used for roads and bridges, you go to the statute, it says motor fuel is any energy source, not just when we think of gasoline and diesel, but any energy source that propels a vehicle on the public roadways. So it's already in state law today that anything that allows a vehicle to be propelled on the roadways is subject to the motor fuel tax. So what the bill does is it makes clear, because we do have the annual registration fee for electric vehicles, that if you're doing at-home charging, that's not what's subject to the motor fuel tax. It'll only be those third-party charges where you're going somewhere, you're charging on the road or outside of a residence. That's the only place where the motor fuel tax would apply. So it builds off of existing state law and makes that clear, so no one's being double taxed in that sense. One of the areas that they're trying to finesse around is this multifamily housing, and actually the location of the chargers. If the location of the chargers is within a fence, then you wouldn't be subject to motor fuel tax. But if it's outside a fence so the general public could access it, it would be potentially. I think that's an area they're trying to hammer out. Then both reaffirm that the Department of Revenue is empowered to figure out they set in law what the rate of motor fuel tax is, and it's based off gasoline and diesel for each of them. Department of Revenue is empowered to determine the equivalency for a gallon of gasoline and its propulsion potential between that and kilowatt hour. So it affirms that in the law that that's their role. Set some kind of a cap to sort of provide a little bit of guidance as to where, kind of how they should get to that number. But outside of that, it'll be up to the department, because that Department of Revenue to do that. Because over time, as you see efficiency in these vehicles, what you want to preserve is that correct ratio of impact to the roadway and motor fuel tax paid. With that's sort of I think the main points. They've got a few differences, but that's, I think, on the core tenets, they're pretty much aligned, and we'll work to. They could very well send both to the governor like they've done in the past, with basically the same bills presented for his signature.
We do have a couple of questions. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Josh. One question I had was answered by the second bullet point there, but I still want to, when you attended these hearings, was there any explanation that you heard offered of what an inspection of a electric fueling thing would look like, and how that would be different from inspecting fuel dispensers?
So one of the things the Department of Agriculture was present, they've been weighing in because they're charged with that, would be, and I'm not an expert on technology, but essentially they're trying to figure out, one, what they're going to have to procure, what type of equipment they'll have to procure. But in one instance that they talked about in committee was the idea that they will go and charge up they'll have to have a battery. They at one point said they'd have to own the DOR would have to go purchase an electric vehicle. But then they were saying, well, you maybe could just buy a battery. So you charge up the battery and then measure to make sure that battery, that the accuracy of the charger reflects what was stored in the battery. So I think that's going to be an area where, with technology and I think this is one of those bills that they are going to make I have no doubt, a very solid effort to get something in law to create a framework, but we'll probably have to revisit with time as technology evolves and get a better understanding. One of the things that they do in the Senate version, House version differs. The Senate adds a little bit more time. Instead of kicking in 24, the Senate has it kicking in January 1st of 2025 to give some extra time for more of those type questions to be resolved. But I mean, it's sort of on that cutting edge. So so there's some things they're going to have to figure out.
Yes, Mr. Sharon.
Josh, the whole at-home charging, what was the reasoning behind that? I mean, we use motor fuel tax to keep the roads in Georgia running. I anticipate in the future, people are going to be charging their cars at home much more than at these little stations that they have. And we're not going to be getting anything to keep our roads up.
So to your point, I think where they're going on that is because you have a registration fee, annual registration that's dedicated to transportation on electric vehicles of about $207-ish a year, that covers for the time being, the at-home charging dynamic. Longer term, what the committee expressed that, and they paid particular focus, I know the board's been briefed and we've had presentations on our work with the Eastern Transportation Coalition on our mileage-based user fee pilot program, that in the longer term, you would see that that annual fee is replaced by something similar to a mileage-based user fee, is at least one thing they've suggested. But that's the reason they don't charge at home, is to avoid that sense of double charging, double taxation. But when you're looking at third party, you're basically retail purchasing of electricity outside of a home, and also in that instance, you're capturing. One of the big reasons that they want to make sure that you're capturing travel from people who don't register vehicles in Georgia. So people who are driving through Georgia and would pull off and charge, you want to make sure that they're paying that motor fuel tax. So I think that's the reason. I think, again, this is going to be one of those points that as technology evolves, I think the other thing you run into is the difficulty of, at the present time, knowing if, let's say you want to scrap the registration fee and then just charge at home, it's actually that how would they know exactly the amount of kilowatts that was used for charging? And so there's a lot of complexity around that. So that's why they're keeping the annual fee in place presently, and then kind of sort of looking down to the future to see how they might modify that policy.
Well, I just sit here and think that if I had an electric vehicle and I paid a couple $100 a year fee for having one, I'm going to be way ahead of what I pay in motor fuel tax today on my gas-powered vehicle. So as an individual, I'm going to save a tremendous amount of money, which means we as a department are going to get a lot less money to keep the roads up.
I think this is a framework and a starting point, and we're still, when you look at the percentage of vehicles in the state, it's relatively low now. It will grow over time, and I think that as there become more and more, modifications of the statute are probably inevitable.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, please continue.
Next, I'm going to jump into House Bill 617, which is the Freight and Logistics 2050 bill. Now, this one didn't cross over, but it may well be the case that the language in it finds itself on another bill, or it passes this session over to the Senate and then action's delayed to next session. But it's important to kind of walk through what's in that bill. So it codifies a statewide freight and logistics implementation plan. Flip there, there's a little acronym. It aligns well with our existing freight, and as I walk through, you'll see it aligns very well with our existing freight planning process. And I think it was meant to harmonize with those, not be duplicative, but build upon it, put it into code so it can relate to other aspects of the bill. And so it would require, based on generally a 20-year projection, identifying project types, projects, critical corridors, categorized with the following terms. Planning has presented multiple freight updates to y'all, and so you should recognize foundational, catalytic, and innovative. So again, sort of a testament to the work of the Plan Division, Plan Director, and her team. I think the General Assembly used a lot of that kind of structure in place to write this portion of the law. So again, great credit to the Plan Division just for their plan. I don't know that they weren't involved. I think that the example was there for to be drawn upon. It also establishes within these plans and sort of areas when you think of freight activity and where freight investment would be critical. It creates 3 economic zones, an international ocean trade zone. So that zone would be any county in which any portion of that county falls within 20 miles of the deep water port. So obviously you're thinking of Savannah, Brunswick, and those counties in the immediate vicinity. Then inland port zone, I think it's about 10 miles, anything within 10 miles of an inland port. And then commercial and industrial zone is any county in which that's within 5 miles of a 200,000 square foot industrial commercial facility. And so really focusing on some of these larger sites that are very critical to freight movement and making sure that as they tie back into the plan, what are kind of projects related to those. Jumping in a little bit more, it requires with the plan an annual update to be given to the House and Senate Transportation Committees by the 15th of each year, and really that look back over the last year. I do want to highlight that there are a couple of components of it that are really interesting and important to remember outside of just additional freight projects. But the report should also include state funding requirements needed to fully match federal aid. So they want to make sure, I think with the way this bill is, they want to make sure that the department has sufficient funds to fully match the federal program, and not just on the formula side, but also with just the sheer amount of the bipartisan infrastructure law that's in those competitive grants, making sure that the state has those funds should it seek to compete, the ability to match those funds, and not just on the highway side, but also on the rail side. There are a lot of competitive rail grant programs. The other piece is, and this kind of goes back to House Bill 170 from 2015, and that was the idea of making state-only investments in projects to help advance them more quickly, and to make sure that as part of this report that they get a good assessment of are we continuing to fully fund our House Bill 170 state-funded transportation program. And then the last one is the status of critical projects and available funding. And I just went ahead, I won't go through each of those, but you can see the list there of the project types, focusing on capacity of highways, interchange improvements, then also rail. So focus on sidings to help. Again, we know that as more train cars leave the port and other locations that you have issues with block crossings in some of our communities, and what are ways to address that? So additional sidings as well as grade separation. So a lot of focus on there, on that. And then you can see there under what's line 80, that G, it calls out those 3 zones, those and projects related to those zones, as well as 83, and this was added in the committee processes, projects of significant economic impact. So those are the, so updates on those project types. Then the second part of the bill is it creates a program fund within the department called the Freight and Logistics 2050 Fund. And this was the finding section, and I highlighted in yellow. I'll read this one aloud. A fund established within the department to accumulate monies from designated sources subject to appropriation to be utilized for the planning, designing, improving, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining the state's transportation freight network is necessary for growing and maintaining the state's important freight network assets. And so that's kind of was the impetus for creating this fund. Excuse me. So it creates the fund, and it ties that fund back to the projects and programs that are in the Freight and Logistics Implementation Plan. And it requires the program to focus on capacity enhancement, as well as it references up those same project, that long list I showed you of different project types. Those are also to be prioritized through the fund. And then it expresses at the end of that code section, it's the intent of the General Assembly that monies collected from the use and impact use of and impact on the statewide transportation network be appropriated to the Georgia Freight 2050 program. So definitely a framework bill. Kind of, we know that over time there will be more that will need to be added and done, but this, I think, is the General Assembly's, this bill is at least the House Transportation Committee, Chairman Jasper's stab at establishing that framework. So and that's sort of the summary on that bill.
Any questions in regards to House Bill 617? Seeing none, I want to thank you so much, Josh. If you want to
Yeah.
finish with the
One
last.
last thing, we'll history note for today. Throwback Wednesday, March the 15th. On this day in 44 BC, Julius Caesar was impaled by the Roman Senate. So if today ain't going well for you, it at least was better than it was for Caesar. And with that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Josh. I almost didn't let you bring out the last one, but thanks for doing that. And I think that we appreciate you sharing all this valuable information. But we would like to have it in printed form as soon as it's feasible for you to get to each one of our board members so that we can have it to look at as we continue our conversation with the legislative body.
Will do, Madam Chair.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before I adjourn the meeting today, I just want to let our board members, and particularly the committee of the Legislative Committee, that this is the last meeting that our board member, Jerry Sharon, will be with us in person. And I want to thank him for his service over the last few years as serving on the board. Tomorrow, a resolution will be introduced for Jerry. He's unable to attend in person, will be on virtually as he listens, but a resolution will be entertained by the board tomorrow to be voted on and placed in the minutes in your honor. Jerry, thank you for your service, particularly to this committee as we have, and I just wanted to recognize you today for that since you're present with us, so thank you much. Seeing that there's no further business, our meeting for the Legislative Committee stands adjourned.
Meeting Whitworth.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me?
No.
Yeah, but it's not loud.
Can you hear me now?
I think you just need to move it closer to you, maybe, Angela.
I can talk really loud if I have to.
That's what I've heard.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. All righty, here we go. I am here today to present the final amended fiscal year 23 budget. After the dust is all settled and everybody went home, here is how we landed. Starting out in the amended FY23 budget, I will just caveat this, letting everyone know we had a very blessed, robust budget. So I'm very thankful to the governor's office, the House and the Senate. The rail program, airport aid program was very successful, and I'll get to those components here in a minute. However, I do want to highlight on the excise, there was, the base was restored, and our base for excise, $1.1 billion was brought in other funds to restore that after the freeze on motor fuel, as well as you'll see here an increase in interest income of $89 million. In Transportation Trust Fund, you'll see no changes in the fees. In the amended budget, that consists of the hotel motel fee, highway heavy impact fee, as well as the electric vehicle, alternative fuel vehicle fee. And you'll see Greta, and what this does, Greta was moved from DCA into the State Road and Tollway Authority's budget in the amended. In the Transit Trust Fund, the rideshare fee, there was no changes. And then you can see there was a $79.4 million increase in state general funds, and I'll get to that here in a minute. On the next slide, you'll see here is the bar chart that I have. 48% of the overall budget went into the capital programs, which consists of capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads admin. In operations, there's roughly 12% in that budget, which consists of the admin programs, program delivery, data collections, planning, traffic management, really all the offices that get the project up and going and administering it, et cetera. In LMIG, you see there's a 10% match in LMIG. In routine maintenance, that's the second largest program, being roughly around 21% of the budget. Payments to CERTA was around 2%, and that's primarily the debt service, the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, and Greta now being moved into that program. In intermodal, you'll see this consists of airport aid, transit, rail, ports and waterways, and then you have the GEO bond debt service and the payments to the ATL. Okay, moving into 23, we have here on the screen, I've broken it down by the programs and the fund sources. As you can see, we have all the different fund sources that are commingled into the programs now. On the top one for GEO bond debt, you'll see that there was $86.6 million moved. There was a fund source swap between motor fuel and transportation trust fund fees. So $86 million was moved down into the capital construction program, as you see there, as well as up top in the GEO bond debt service, there was a slight increase in the variable rate bond debt. So that's reflecting that there for the overall increase in the GEO bond debt, ending up at 112. In capital construction here, the net effect of, we had $35 million being redistributed to other programs in motor fuel. The biggest redistribution was down to routine maintenance of that $25 million that you see there. And that was to cover the cost for inflation and the highs or project costs that we were seeing on the cost of commodities. Y'all probably recall last month that I was talking about like some of the contracting had gone up 70%, like sweeping, mowing was increasing between 20 and 30%, if not greater. So that helped in routine maintenance cover some of those costs. The remainder of those fundings in the capital construction program were going to those high escalation costs, but they also put in $50 million that was dedicated toward large economic development projects that are going on throughout the state. So the overall increase there was 101. You heard me talk about the routine maintenance increase. In LMIG, the increase there was for $8.9 million to bring that to 10% of the total overall excise budget. And then in payments to CERTA, that is reflecting Greta being moved from DCA into that program. On this next slide, as I said earlier, airport aid had $18.2 million that was moved into the airport aid program. Roughly, there was a $298 million request overall in airport aid for the list that came in. Roughly 74.6 million of it is eligible. You can see we have 44 million here, which makes up about 60% of that list. There's one specific item was for the Dalton Airport that was spelled out. Other than that, we would use the priority list to administer all the other funding. In rail, there was an add of $9.6 million. And if any of y'all want the details on the rail after, I can give those to you after the meeting. There, $3.4 million was going to the heart of Georgia. $1.7 million is going to Georgia Southwestern. There's $1.5 million going to the Chattanooga-Chickamauga Railroad. $572,000 is going to the Carter-Parrott, and $2.4 million is going to Ageechee Railroad. So that is the add there for the rail lines. In transit, there was no change to the transit trust fund fees or to the transportation trust fund. However, in state general funds, they did appropriate $1.4 million, and what this does is it allowed us to match funds for the FTA grants. We have roughly around 125 subrecipients throughout the state. At year end, last year, it became a challenging as the federal bill was brought down later than our year-end close. So this gave us the ability to match those the federal funds with these additional dollars brought into our budget without causing a delay and an impact in the 24 budget. That is the 23 budget, as you can see, was very robust and intermodal, so we're very appreciative for that budget. Does anyone have any questions on 23 before I move into 24? Okay. Okay, moving into 24, as you can see here, the revenue estimate that was set by the state economist, they had an increase over the base of $119 million that for a total excise of $2.1 billion. The Transportation Trust Fund had an increase of $51.3 million. That's the hotel motel fee, heavy vehicle fee, and EV alternative fee. And then in the Transit Trust Fund, which is the rideshare fees, they had an increase of 7.6. Those two components there, the Transportation Trust Fund and the Transit Trust Fund, are both adjusted based off the FY22 actual collection. So they do a 2-year look back, and that's appropriated going forward. So those where those numbers are from. And then there is a $4.7 million decrease to state general funds that I will go over here in 1 minute or two. All right, next slide is the bar graph that we showed that I did previously, very similar to the 23 bar graph. The capital projects program is at 48%, and routine maintenance is still the second largest. However, in the House version, there is a plan for LMIG to increase LMIG over the next 5 years to raise it to 15%. So you see here in 24's budget, LMIG is being raised by 11%. And payments to CERTA, intermodal, GeoBond, and payments to the ACTL, very similar as they were in the 23 budget. All right, moving on into the detail, the GeoBond debt service, they're transferring and doing a fund source swap of the $86 million that they did in the amended to put it into the base for 24. That is being put down into the capital construction programs, and they've adjusted for the higher debt service payment and GeoBond debt, which makes up that $438 million increase. In the capital construction program, you can see here that there is between the it's lower than the governor's version that was originally put out by the governor's office of $1.026 billion. It's been lowered to $993. These funds were distributed to go toward the $2,000 COLA that all state employees, he's proposing a pay raise for all state employees. And then funds were redistributed to capital maintenance, routine maintenance, and then finally the plan for the LMIG being increased over the 5 years that's coming out of the capital program. I will highlight here that we're very supportive of LMIG and what it does, but one of the big components that we're going to see here is that's coming at the expense of the capital program, and with the increased funds needed for IIJA and the state match, we will have to analyze this because this may be challenging over the next few years. As LMIG starts to grow and that program grows, this component may become an issue over time. In capital maintenance, you'll see an increase of $5 million here. That's to help offset those escalating costs in commodities that we're seeing in the capital program as well as the $8.7 million. Yes, in the $8.7 million. In program delivery, you'll see here there is $3.9 million added, and that's primarily for the $2,000 COLA adjustment as well as statewide changes. So throughout the budget, when I say statewide changes, they had changes to the Department of Administrative Services insurance policy for like general liability and cybersecurity. And then we've had some changes statewide for the TeamWorks billing, which is our financial system and our HR system. Moving into data collections, you'll see here there is a $41,000 increase, and this is strictly the COLA adjustment for the state employees' pay raise and for that DOAS insurance adjustment for cybersecurity and the general liability. In departmental admin, you'll see an increase of $5.3 million. This is for the COLA statewide in the admin program, and for the insurance adjustments, and for the TeamWorks billing, and for server upgrades throughout the department. As you look here at LMIG, you can see LMIG has increased to $32.1 million. That is being reflected at 11% of the overall budget. I talked about that previously in the capital program. So you can see this is an all-time high for LMIG with the department. In local roads admin, there is no change. In the planning program, you'll see an increase of $198 million. This consists of primarily the COLA adjustment and statewide changes, as well as the request for 3 additional planners within the planning division. So they've requested those. In routine maintenance, you'll see an increase of $31.6 million in the routine maintenance program. That's to annualize that $25 million cost increase that we put into the amended to help offset with the cost of commodities, as well as the COLA adjustments and the statewide changes. In traffic management, there is a $906 million adjustment, and that is for the cost of living adjustment as well as the DOAS insurance. Okay, and the next slide here, in airport aid, you can see the base is being cut by $6.3 million, bringing that to $20 million. In 23, the base was close to $44 million, which can match almost 60%. This component here with the $20 million leaves us to match roughly 37% of the list. So I'll be curious to see if this changes when the Senate version comes out here in the next week or so, see what this actually ends up at. And for airport aid, that was a surprise to me. In ports and waterways, you'll see an increase of $7,300. That's strictly the $2,000 pay raise adjustment in DOAS insurance adjustment. Then in the rail program, you can see there's a total net effect of a $1.6 million adjustment, of which $7 million of that is due to that local, from House Bill 588, the local diesel appropriation, which requires the law requires the commissioner to develop a formula based off operating miles. That's what that is. And then the $5.4 million, which you see here, is a net effect of the $8 million that was put in last year's budget for a one-time appropriation for bringing rail lines up to Class 2 standards. And then what it has in here, in addition to that, they have $2.3 million that's being dedicated for track improvements in Henry County. That's dedicated in there, as well as the state safety oversight, and then the $2,000 COLA adjustment and all the DOA insurance adjustments. So you can see a lot going on there. In the transit program, there was roughly $5 million that was appropriated in the Transportation Trust Fund. And what this is, the Transportation Trust Fund is the transit match for those 125 subrecipients to administer formula grants in the urban and rural areas. And then the $7.6 million is the formula distribution, which is dedicated for transit projects throughout the state that we do. All right, and then finally on this last side, in payments to CERTA, what this is reflective of the lower debt service payments that we have, as well as Greta being transferred into that program permanently now from DCA. And then in payments to the ATL, that's strictly the COLA and the TeamWorks billing and DOAS adjustments that we have there. That is our 24 budget. As you can see, we've got a reduction in airport aid, and we have a plan to phase in and increase LMIG over the next 5 years. So several things to watch going into the Senate version. And I'll entertain any questions on the 24 budget.
You have a question?
One thing, a couple of times in there, you mentioned it was millions of dollars, but it was in hundreds of thousands. Was that a typo or? I'll talk to you later.
Talk to me offline, because.
You said 906 million, making it 906,000.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That happened a couple of times.
Millions, billions,
Yeah.
you know, hey.
Any other questions, Ms. Whitworth?
No questions. All right, well, I will be curious to see how 24 all shakes out at the end next month once I see you guys again. I'll keep my fingers crossed. How about that? All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any other business come before us? Ms. Whitworth, is that all you had?
That's all I have.
Okay. If not, we'll stand adjourned.
Ask Mr. Davis if he'd come forward. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you. And You know, I'll take 906 million. That'd be great for traffic management. Madam Chair, members of the committee, members of the board, appreciate y'all letting me be here today to talk a little bit about our traffic signal program that we call SIGOPS. Give a little overview of where we are, and these are some fun facts you can take to all your social gatherings this weekend. In Georgia, there's over 9,500 traffic signals across the state. Just over 6,500 of those are actually on state routes, the rest of those being on local roads and whatnot. The number of agencies that operate and maintain these traffic signals, well over 100, and that takes various forms of how that looks and how that operates and how they maintain those. A few years ago, you probably have heard of a program that we had at the department where we sought to look to optimize traffic signals across jurisdictional boundaries. So just looking at an older map of Metro Atlanta here, I think there's a few new towns that have formed since then. You can see that there's a very large number of jurisdictions that are here, various counties, various cities, various GDOT districts that are there, and our roads know no difference of when they pass through them, right? When you're coming into town up from Mackworth, you can pass through Cobb County, Marietta, City of Atlanta. That will be your commute in. And the problem we found we were facing back when in 2010 we were starting these programs was all of these agencies, all these jurisdictions would operate their traffic signals and maintain their traffic signals at different levels, different ways, and it just made for a very inefficient commuter path and inefficient operations. We wanted to see interoperability between these jurisdictions so that there was a seamless experience for the driver and look to build a regional network of communications. So on top of all of that, GDOT had a number of different contracts and facilities and consultants that were helping doing these things. So each one of these little bubbles you see here represents a different program or a different contract we had to maintain and operate our traffic signals. And there's a lot. And on top of that, locals had their own as well. And so we formed what we call the Regional Traffic Operations Program, or RTOP, back in 2010, 2011, to put all of that under one umbrella, to gain some efficiencies in what the state could do from a contracting perspective, and to make our traffic signals and our arterials, our state routes, run better. So that brought about the RTOP program, and over the past 10 years, it grew into a larger program. Over 41 corridors of regional significance were the targets for how we operated those. That encompassed over 1,700 traffic signals in the Metro Atlanta region, over 12 counties, over 13 cities, and brought on consultant resources to help us do that. The program saw great success in improving throughput of vehicles and overall operation and maintenance of our arterials and our traffic signal systems. It really helped us also achieve a lot of those goals of consistent operations and maintenance so that you had that seamless operation coming in on your commutes. Part of that program, it identified a lot of needs and gaps that we have, and so we were able to leverage a lot of resources from industry and our partners to do that. We conducted a statewide upgrade to all of our traffic signal software, so the things that actually make all these lights turn red, yellow, and green. There's a lot of intelligence that goes into that, into the systems that run it, both at the silver cabinets that are at the intersections that you see out there, as well as the systems back at the TMC, the Transportation Management Center, that centrally command a lot of these things and can respond to traffic events and things to really give us what we call that active management of traffic signals, being in front of issues, being in front of traffic so that you're not sitting there always screaming at why that light's red when the one right in front of you is green. That was a huge effort, upgrading not only our state route system, but also working with our local partners to update every signal in the state. And I'll add too that amongst our peers across the country, this common system that we have in the state is very much the envy of practitioners. It makes a lot of efficiencies on training, efficiency on operations. There's not this translation from imagine talking from an Android phone to an iPhone or a Mac to a PC, all that kind of same stuff. We have a common platform which helps us pursue a lot of efficiencies there. On top of all that, we also brought communications, centralized communications to all of our traffic signals. So from anywhere in the state, we can log onto the network and be able to interact, manipulate, change, improve our traffic signals, and monitor our traffic signals remotely. In the United States, we actually have the second largest connected signal network in the country. another fact that you can take with you. The first is New York City. They have over 13,000 signals connected back centrally. Georgia has just over 8,000 now connected back. We also work with a lot of our local agencies who also have their own systems and networks. So that's been essential to improve our response to maintenance issues at traffic signals and improving their operations and giving us really 24/7 monitoring, which I'll touch on in a minute. Also built on a lot of this is some of the open data resources we have. These systems generate a lot of data, and it's a lot of use to us, but it's also a lot of use to our partners, whether it be research institutions or third parties. They like to work with us to gather this data and do things like optimizing routing algorithms on your favorite navigation apps, believe it or not. And I'll touch on this a little bit too, is a lot of this work also built the foundation for our connected vehicle program that we've built out in the state as well. So all that done under this great program called RTOP. But it was just in Metro Atlanta at the time. Yeah, we had some statewide efforts, but the actual active management was just in Metro Atlanta. So in 2018, we said, why can't we do this statewide? Why can't we expand this model, this service, this consistency to the entire state? And so we started up a program which we called the Regional Traffic Signal Operations Program, or RTSO. We love our acronyms. In 2018, to work with our districts as our primary operators and maintainers in the rest of the state to bring that same level of active management to our traffic signals. And so over those past 10 years, and I'll take us up to 2010 here, we saw the program have a lot of advancement. We went from an emission statement that sought to just move cars through to a program that sought to proactively manage and maintain and leverage technology to deliver this. Originally, it was only 428 intersections, and we were at over 1,700, and even more when we expanded to the rest of the state. And our technology and infrastructure went from zero connectivity to 100%, and lots of data resources. And so we felt it was time to really capture that energy and what the program was doing and work with our communications office as well to rebrand the program to what we now call SIGOPS. And that encompassed this active management profile for traffic signals for the whole state. And organizationally, we divided ourselves up into 6 different regions, 3 here in the metro region, and then the 6 encompassing 2 districts each out there. And so that really brought that new model of active management through traffic signals to across the state. So what does this mean? And I like to use this slide because this is an experience that we always have, or we often had, I should say. We would get a call, a complaint from a citizen, from my parents who may have been coming through town, often my wife as well. Traffic was terrible. I sat at this light. How dare you? And so this is a Saturday. Most people are enjoying their weekends, and we have a lot of questions around that. Was traffic typical? Was there something going on? Did something break in the field? So our engineers and technicians would come in on Monday and answer the call and look into it. Oh, everything looks fine. I didn't really see anything. So we went back and would look at it. We get the same call the next Saturday. Did we really fix the problem? There had to be a better way to do this. And so this is what so much of this investment, so much of this work has done, is it provided this platform we could have where we have 24/7 monitoring, so we could see what really happened in real time, and looking back on that Saturday, so we could truly address the issues, truly address the complaints, and even better, get in front of them, avoid the call altogether, to be able to proactively resolve these issues. This platform we use here, called Automated Traffic Signal Performance Measures, was actually developed by Utah DOT, an open source code that we've been able to be a part of and contribute back into to gather this data and help us analyze it. And this is that data analytics piece that really helps us get in front of issues and be more efficient in what we do. We've taken it a step further on our own and created what we call SIGOPS metrics. And this is really just a similar software tool that aggregates a lot of that data we have here that really helps us focus our engineers and technicians to where the issues are, where they need to make the most impact, and get in front of them. And this is a tool we have on the web right now that if you're ever bored on a Friday night, you can go and mess around with and see how your commute home is and let us know how we can improve operations. But it's a lot of good work that's been going on, award-winning work, I should add, to build these platforms. And there are a number of other agencies across the country that have also adopted this open source platform as well to improve their operations. And just another snapshot of how we can use this platform to dive into particular problems. This one's looking at what we call progression on a corridor, or how often you hit a green light. This helps us monitor the trends of that, or is the system degrading? Where do we need to go out and focus our resources, focus our efforts? And that's really what facilitates us to be able to have this whole statewide approach to signal operations. So that's all fine and good, but what does it really mean? What are the actual benefits of this program and investment? So I just want to highlight a few scenarios that have really, in my opinion, demonstrated the value of not only the RTOP program, but also now SIGOPS as we've grown and matured. I think we all remember this event a few years ago. It was quite an event when the bridge collapse happened, but this was really, in my opinion, for our signal operations folks, the culmination of a lot of years of work, that when this happened, as soon as this incident occurred, we were able to immediately go out and prepare and implement and deploy solutions to handle detoured traffic. And without all that investment and all those resources you had seen over time in the previous years, that wouldn't have been able to happen. So it was unfortunate that's what led to that demonstration of the resources we had, but it really led to the benefit and that we could really use to manage that those 6 weeks of time where we had to manage that volume of detour traffic on our arterials. We also, about a year later, had an event here in town, down at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium called the Super Bowl. That brought in a tremendous amount of traffic management challenges for us. And this is a dashboard of a tool that we built for real-time visualization of traffic impacts during that event. Working with that planning committee over time, they kept telling us it's a 10-day event, it's a 10-day event, be prepared for a 10-day traffic event. And so we knew we would need to be able to focus where we needed to be, where were things moving around in real time, and where we needed to focus our resources to adjust and deal with the influx of patrons, tourists, what have you, in traffic into the downtown Atlanta area. And so this is the dashboard we built to monitor real-time traffic for that, all based on the same data and resources. And it really led to a successful event for us from a traffic standpoint, from a traffic management standpoint, and we've used it since then as well, from college football national championships and upcoming World Cups that will be coming to town in the future. So not everything is in just Metro Atlanta and things we're doing with that. This technology also helps us across the state. This is an example where we are working in the town of Millen, Georgia, where there's some issues around blocked railroad crossings. And we wanted to see what we could do with this technology to get better information to drivers about when these crossings may be blocked. And so we used our signal system here to incorporate a lot of those crossing points. So here's everywhere where we have those main inbound and egress points into the city, or the town of Millen. And these are the main crossings here that get blocked throughout. So what we wanted to do was be able to provide that information when this is. And so we use our signal system. There we go. Sorry about that. To populate these kinds of signs here, these are pictures from two different locations where we provide information to drivers that says, just simply with leveraging our existing technology, that the crossings are blocked and you may need to find an alternative detour. It's an example of a fairly low-cost solution to provide that travel information to improve operations. You know, just some signs hanging above the span that says the railroad crossing blocks. We have a beacon here that lights up whenever the gates go down on one of the crossings. And we're working on that now to make sure we understand that it's really helping benefit mobility around that. Up in the northwest part of the state, we've got an operation here that our engineers have called pseudo-cord. So these are two traffic signals that normally run free, meaning they're on their own, they aren't coordinated between one another, but it made sense to have some sort of coordination between the two. So we're able to use our communications network and the systems out there for these two signals to talk to each other in real time and reduce the number of times that you have to stop between those two signals. And so we got a lot of data. We got some charts here of data just to show some of the improvements that we can spend a lot of time later on if you're interested talking about what they really mean. But in real time, we're able to make these improvements, implement them, and see the benefit immediately from them. Down in the Savannah, we have a project where we're working on what we call freight signal priority. So signal priority is a concept when you give a slight extension of a green light, an early green light, or an extended green light a little bit longer for certain kinds of vehicles at traffic signals. And so we wanted to do a pilot down here with some of our partners there with the port to make sure that we understood if freight signal priority was a feasible strategy for improving freight mobility. Less stops of trucks running drayage in and out of the port is a great benefit from a mobility standpoint, from a safety standpoint, as well as an environmental standpoint. And so this system, we were able to use actually connected vehicle technology as well to implement freight signal priority, where we're running a pilot now to measure the benefits from an environmental standpoint, fuel consumption standpoint, and then reduce number of stops of giving trucks just a little bit of extra green time as they pass through these intersections. And on top of all that, I mentioned how this enables a lot of our connected vehicle work. This is a layer on top of our signal work here, where we're able to actually deploy technology that communicate directly with vehicles that are so suitably equipped. And we, to date, have just over 1,000 roadside units across the state deployed, most of them in Metro Atlanta at signalized intersections, but also down in Savannah, as I mentioned, and also in the western part of the state around the Kia, Georgia plant. Right now, we're using these a lot on public sector applications. I mentioned the freight signal priority, but we're also using it to leverage for transit signal priority, which is the same concept as freight signal priority, but just for buses, as well as emergency vehicle preemption. Again, all this technology, all these resources, all these applications are built upon a framework, an operations program that started back in 2010 and has matured into what it is today. And with that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Jeff?
You may have covered this in your explanation, and I'm sure I missed it. But with all these traffic lights out there, could we or do we emit or have the capability of emitting Wi-Fi and cellular data signals for private users of this? And if so, could you explain what that might look like?
Sure. The answer is somewhat complicated. It's yes and no. The information we would transmit directly from these things is over dedicated spectrum set aside for the FCC for transportation. It's a direct connection, so it's from the traffic signal to a radio that would be in a car, so it's not your cell phone. And that is, we used to be a technology called DSRC, Dedicated Short Range Communications. Now it's a technology called Cellular V2X, and so that's a direct piece. The things that we could potentially send to a cell phone, like we would have, like say you have an app on your phone that gets some kind of transportation data. Our data, open data architecture that I mentioned is the way we would do that. We provide an open data portal into all of our stuff that we are generating and putting out, so that third-party resources, things like Waze, things like Google Maps, stuff like that, can ingest that information and provide it back to users in a meaningful way. A lot of our traffic data comes through 511. We don't push signal data out through that just yet, but there are a lot of third-party providers that have started to ingest that information that we're providing through things like APIs that they're able to use for that application.
Yeah, but could these signals perhaps also be used for devices that could maybe push out stronger Wi-Fi and cell signals, especially if you have areas that there may be some voids along the way? In other words, just strengthen the signal for common use. Is that a possibility?
I don't want to step on the toes of our utilities office, but they do work often with small cell providers and to help facilitate our infrastructure for that very end.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you all.
Program delivery stands adjourned.
To ask our state traffic engineer, Alan Davis, to come back to the podium and do a presentation to us and an update on the HERO unit.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back up here. If y'all are disappointed to see me back up here, I hear they're offering refunds at the elevator. I am excited to share this one. I'm joined here with Mr. Jason Josie, our HERO manager, to give an update on the HERO program. Where did HERO come from? Where did it start? The Highway Emergency Response Operator Program began in 1994. This was all in preparation for the Olympics coming to town, with pretty humble beginnings, only 12 operators, just 7 routes at the time. The primary purpose of standing up this program was to help minimize traffic congestion by clearing wrecked and disabled vehicles from travel lanes. This provided traffic control, also provided traffic control at incident scenes and helped local and state law enforcement as they worked crashes and events. HERO also assists stranded motorists and helps change flat tires, provides fuel, and helps contact responders for other mechanical failures in vehicles. And see some of the early trucks here. I think we've done a little bit better job, as you'll see, of how that program has progressed. But hard to believe that so long ago that this program stood up. A little bit about what the program does. In my opinion, HERO is very much the face of the department. They're out there providing customer service every single day to motorists. Looking at this graph here, you can see even that the majority of the the majority of the events that HERO operators encounter, and this is just a snapshot from January 2023, just over 1,800, close to 1,000 of those events they handle are assisting motorists in some form or fashion. Right behind that, you see that it's crashes, collisions is one of the key factors that they're working on in an event. So it's moving a crash out of the roadway, assisting local law enforcement or something on working in an event, things like that. What HERO does every day and every night, though, is a great service to the state and to motorists, but it's really integral to traffic management and what we do every day for the department. It provides increased safety for responders and drivers. One of the big impacts it has, well, is helping reduce secondary crashes. So whenever there's congestion on the interstate or something like that, when there's a crash or something, there's often secondary crashes that occur down upstream from these crashes. And the work that HERO does for us in incident management helps us to reduce those. Through all that and through quick clearance of these events, it helps improve travel times, improves trip reliability, and even improves motorist awareness of first responders when they're working events. It improves our operations overall through improved incident management. It goes through the entire traffic incident management timeline, which is a term we use to describe the start of incident detection all the way to when an incident is cleared out of the roadway. And on top of all that, on top of all of the other things, when we have emergencies out there, HERO is often the first ones out there to work the scene, to work traffic, and make sure folks are safe and the right responders are alerted of the incident going on. So that brings us to where HERO is today. I mentioned this, our early beginnings in '94, and today we have 159 operator positions covering over 32 routes in the Metro Atlanta area. That encompasses 382 miles of patrol routes, and we've also added this thing called express lanes into their repertoire as well. HERO is responsible for facilitating the reversal of those express lanes every day and every night. That involves sweeping the corridors and make sure they're ready for reversal, they're safe for reversal, and it's really an essential operation to the operations of those express lanes. They even have a special designation for the operators who conduct those, the master operators. We created that position to really handle the complexities associated with express lane reversal and monitoring those. And really over time, as we've gotten to where we are today, the demands of HERO have only increased, not only from a geographical sense of expanding their coverage to those additional routes, but also for the emergencies that they've had to encounter. We've had snowstorms, hurricanes, all kinds of events, even planes landing on the interstate where HERO is the ones front and center to make sure things are handled from a traffic management standpoint and a first responder safety standpoint. But I do want to point out a few of our current challenges with HERO program, and I want to draw your attention to this chart here in that top line. This is a snapshot of number of HERO operators. We have the head count from 2019 up till last fall in 2022. And you see kind of a trend downward, slow trend of operators, the number of operators reducing. So recruitment and retention, like for many folks in the world, in the country, has been a challenge. Why? I mean, there's plenty of external influences associated with that, pandemic, job markets in flux, you name it. It's not something that's unique to just HERO. But it is a tough job. These men and women are out there every day putting their lives on the lines to help serve motorists, and so it is indeed a hard job to do, and they do some great work with it. And even things like compensation have been a struggle over time, but Jason will talk a little bit in a minute about some of the things we've been doing to improve that. In terms of operations and what some of these impacts have had on the program with the reduction in available workforce, this is a snapshot of our stats from January 23 again. Our average emergency dispatch time and all dispatch are just over 20 minutes. The average for all of our HERO arrival to scene time, so that includes our dispatch from the TMC and others, as well as the incidents that HERO see on their own is right around 11 minutes. Our target for these is generally around 10 minutes. But even then, in our clearance times, you see that the time for lanes to be cleared is just over 37 minutes. All in all, we see that in the midst of this, the HERO is still performing their jobs and doing a great service. Really, what we can see over time, too, in the number of assists that HERO sees, and this trends almost directly with our workforce, is the number of assists that HERO is able to do on the roads has slowly declined. This is a snapshot from the past 2 years, averaged over each quarter, of the number of assists each quarter that HERO is able to conduct. And this trends almost directly with the staffing with HERO. But operationally, as well, our actual response times do not hold that same kind of trend. There's a slight increase in the average response time over each quarter, but all in all, HERO's still under 20 minutes in their average response for each quarter. So that's a lot of challenges that we're facing too, but the good news is there's a lot being done for them. I want to invite Jason to come up and talk a little bit about some of the great work that he and his team have been doing to deliver the HERO program and overcome the challenges.
Madam Chair, Board, how are you guys today? So, Alan didn't leave a whole lot of room for me to really dig into it and wax poetically about a lot of the good stuff going on at HERO, because he covered a lot of really good points. And we're not going to shy away from some of the decline in the numbers that we've had to experience due to the loss of manpower. But one thing that I will say is there still has been the overwhelming zest and zeal to still go out there and make sure that calls and incidents are responded to, and there was a pretty significant show of force when it comes to supporting those other agencies. So what are we doing that's going to kind of change that a little bit? Well, one thing as far as recruitment is concerned, we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. Something that we have been doing traditionally at HERO, all the way as far as back as when I was a trainee, was we were focusing on ex-fire and military law enforcement to bring in to do this kind of work. As you could easily imagine, it requires a certain kind of wiring to be able to go out there and do what we do on a regular basis. And the thought was, let's go after people who are hardwired to be able to make that kind of a transition to this new theater that we're going to introduce them to. And make no mistake about it, it is a totally different theater than what most people who assume that they are first responders or anything of the sort have been acclimated to. It is a completely different animal. Now, over time, what we did also find was that hard wiring is just that, it's hard wiring. And it became a little difficult sometimes to undo, to be able to get them to buy into what it is that we're trying to get them to understand about what is needed to be understood about traffic incident management, okay? And we've had some successes, some major successes. But we've also noticed a trend that we didn't expect. And that trend was we were getting some 19 and 20-year-old applicants coming in. And they were coming into this line of work for the first time. And they presented to us a paradigm shift in focus. The 19, 20-year-olds were showing to be the better operators over time. They were coming in, taking to it like fish to water, without any kind of prejudices in terms of what they already knew coming on versus what you were trying to teach them. And so what we started to notice was we were getting a 19, 20, 21-year-old that gave us not only good quality response work, but 5, 6, 8 years. Let's change the focus a little bit. Let's start targeting high school. We feel like this kind of work, the danger doesn't change, but this kind of work is something that if we introduce it to a younger applicant with a whole lot of future in front of them and with the kind of excitement and action that the work does bring to the table and the good training that we give, we could probably change the complete dynamic of what a hero operator looks like in terms of what we used to do with recruiting. I'm pausing because we hit a school yesterday, day before yesterday, and it was pretty successful. But we haven't really kicked this effort off as robustly as we want to, but it's coming. But one thing that we do feel like is going to help out quite a bit is the job work that we were just blessed with. I want to thank you guys for that. That was tremendous. It was well received. We think it'll be a good recruiting effort. And when we reach out to these high school students and junior college and some college students, that will be a really good, for lack of a better term, carrot on the end of the stick to get them to come in and try out this kind of work. To that end, we just found out today that with our numbers as decreased as they are, we have 96 applicants in line right now through our Indeed effort. And so that is a major plus. Now, again, we're still going to have to sift through all of those individuals to make sure that they're going to be good quality hero candidates. But for the most part, it is certainly a good start when you're going from 0 to 96 on day one. So the high school recruiting is one effort that we're going to try. Another effort is we're going to try to focus on bringing in more women. That also is another area that we've noticed a very, very significantly superior operator. Women that do this kind of work have the kind of patience and attention to detail that is required also. But we just don't get a lot of them because they're not aware that the work exists. So we're going to start focusing on the women. And as far as retention is concerned, the good news about Hero is, it's work that everybody who does it fall in love with. Most of the people who do it and stick around with it is because they absolutely adore the work. It has to be said, a lot of people that don't stick around, it's for one of a few reasons. It's either because it's not what they thought it was, which was changing tires and giving gas only, or there was some elements outside of Hero's control, like family and personal issues that just took them away from the work. But compensation goes a long way with making sure that something like that is addressed. And like I said, job worth for us recently goes a long way in helping us with the compensation part of it. And it was very, very well received. One of the goals that Andrew and I put together a long time ago was to make sure that one day the starting salary for a Hero operator would be $40,000. We felt like at the time that is something that was meaty enough to get an individual to sink their teeth into and come in and try this career out. Well, we've met that now, and so that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Outside of the box. So some of the things that I'd like to bring your attention to that we probably have talked about today is some of the things that Hero is seeing and some of the plans that Hero has for the future. We have been seeing a lot of tractor trailer incidents, commercial incidents. And from our seat of the pants way of dealing with stuff, we've found out that, you know, we're getting a different kind of commercial driver. You know, the trucks are automatic now. I know when I was younger coming up, trucks had like 18, 19, 20 gears in them, something like that. And a lot of the drivers were super seasoned and very cordial on the road. But now, a lot of the trucks are automatics. And the recruiting effort for truck drivers is very, very robust too. And they're getting a lot of unseasoned drivers out there. And so we're running into a lot of crazy stuff like livestock on the interstate. I heard that mentioned earlier. Chemical spills, aircraft, standing water, things that traditionally we have not been exposed to that are challenging us to be a little bit more proficient in what it is we do on a regular basis. So it's so far beyond what Hero was when it first started. So some of the efforts we want to try to dig into is getting some standing water training, getting more heavily involved in some of the hazmat certifications, and getting beyond the awareness level. We're even looking into making the EMR portion of our training a little bit more robust by upping the training on that, and rather than letting the operators go through the EMR training and not have to register nationally, to start giving them the opportunity. We're not going to mandate it, but we just give them the opportunity to register nationally and to try to hold that registration and use that as something that will help the organization as a whole over time. We're running into a lot of major blood and bone trauma, and we're not having any issues with it. And we'd like to think that that's due to some of the good training that we go through. So all in all, we're doing pretty well in spite of some of the challenges that we've had. And I do believe that it's going to pass. All right. So probably this time next year, you'll be getting some fantastic news from Hero. With that, I'll open up for any questions that you may have for me.
Do we have any questions or comments from our board members? Yes. Comments?
As I told you earlier, my granddaughter was had an incident on the road, and I told my family, if you ever got that problem, to call 511. Well, they ignored me, so they stayed on the road for 4.5 hours. So I think, well, I hope they have learned their lesson now. But yes, but God bless y'all for what you do.
Thank you.
Any others? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments. We wanted to, let me thank Alan and especially thank Jason for his leadership of the Hero unit and for what he does that is literally 24/7. He goes home, but I don't think he ever shuts down. So he's hardwired, as he said. And so I want to thank you, Jason, for your leadership and for your focus, and especially this slide of overcoming challenges. Jason and Alan chose their words carefully about overcoming challenges. What you saw earlier back there was that graph of a downward trend in employment, and they are working hard to do things differently, including, as he mentioned, compensation, which again, from our budget last year was dollars to work on recruitment and retention. So we're very thankful that in the 23 budget, I guess that's this year's budget, there was money to do that. For entry level is about $38,000 for a trainee. So that's pretty attractive. But as Jason said, that our previous approach, which we had great success with, but it's no longer working, was looking for people that was in their second career, that had been in law enforcement, first responders, military, that sort of had some very disciplined training. So they're looking at doing things differently, of getting those younger people in, and that's a pretty good salary that should hopefully, again, based on 96, the reality is when you get that many, you start going through, and there's a drug test involved too, that weeds out a lot of people usually, ultimately, but it's a big issue. So, but let me just be clear that we're not functioning the way anybody wants to function. And Jason and every Hero operator has a very big point of pride, as you can hear from Jason's presentation today, and pride in what they do. And it's a challenge for them when they can't do the things they know they should be doing because they're just simply spread really thin. As Jason said, they're going to respond. The data still shows that our response is still pretty good. But what's not is how long it takes us to get things and help law enforcement and first responders moving. That number is probably more than double of where we used to be able to do because we're just spread thin. And I remind you, as Alan said at the beginning, this is a 24/7, 365 operation. And we're so thin that we've got to revisit strategically how do we deliver the best service we can at the most strategic times possible to serve Georgians. This presentation is totally intentional to make sure you're aware because some of your county commissioners and or law enforcement have concerns about our ability to do what we used to do. And that's legitimate because we're under half the manpower that we should have, less than half of the total amount, but from where we traditionally have been, we're under half. I don't have the turnover numbers with me. Alan or Jason may know, but at one point it was about 89%, 90% turnover rate in Hero unit. So it's not a long tenure. The people that are still here they're fantastic, dedicated. You won't find more committed people that work hard every day. So we've got to work on that retention part, recruitment and retention. If you get retention right, you don't have to work as hard on recruitment. And so there's a lot of things to do. But we have heard, and I've got a meeting coming up with a county commission and we've had a meeting with Meg, and I met with a state representative earlier, just saying, we don't see you guys. You're not out there like you used to be. That's right, because we're just not, you can only do so much with the people you have. So this is a real point of concern. As you can see, the team, Jason and Alan and Andrew and Meg and John Hibbert, everybody's focused on how do we retool, how do we do things differently. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? So we're trying to do a lot of things differently to build back the workforce so that Jason can come back in a year. That's optimistic, Jason. I'm not going to hold you to that, but that'd be great if you came back in a year and said, we're fully staffed, our response times are, 10 minutes or less, our lane clearance time is 12 minutes, and we're hitting all our performance indicators. They look on a daily, weekly basis on performance of how they're doing. They track it religiously of how are they doing, because every minute matters and backs up, and as many compliments that I've shared with you at board meetings, the compliments that we get from the citizens that they help and the motorists who are truly in distress of all sorts. The stress of having a flat tire on the downtown connector or 285, or it's been in a crash. They are truly, Hero is the appropriate name for these employees. And then the other thing, again, the first responders, fire, rescue, PD, Hero makes it possible that they do their job safely. They can focus on saving somebody's life or rendering aid or putting out a fire because Hero has got traffic control, and they know that Hero has their back. It is a huge, huge benefit to the first responders, law enforcement, EMS, fire, rescue, you name it. So I just wanted to make sure this board understood that we're not where we need to be. We're not satisfied with the results that we're getting now. I'm very satisfied with the performance. Everybody's 110 in. They're working hard now, but we need more people to have the reach of 382 miles of coverage on a 24/7, 365 basis. So I'll probably share some more information with you. Well, not probably. I will share some more information with you in the near future about some adjustments and continuing changes that we do, so that we can be more effective than we are now. So, Madam Chair, I'm sorry to ramble on, but This is a very great program. It represents the very best of GDOT and the very best people of GDOT. And we want to make sure that we can serve Georgia the way people have known us to be able to do so going forward. And it's going to take some continued work, and I know we always have great support from the board. And it takes a very special person that can do this job. So I just thank you for letting me share that, and just know we're committed to continual improvement.
Question?
Yes.
Russell, this may be for you or anyone, but I'm looking at the picture of this truck here, and do we still have private sponsors that help fund some of this like we've had in the past? I think it was State Farm. Is that still a thing?
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, the State Farm sponsorship did end. We did just renew a new sponsorship contract for 511 and Hero, and they're currently our 511 program at the TMC, as well as Hero and Champ, and they're currently advertising out that for a new sponsorship.
And to that end, does that sponsorship money, how far does that go into resourcing the program?
It does go back to funding the program itself.
No, I know, but
It actually-
is it half the funding, or is it 25% of the funding?
No, it helps us match federal funds.
Okay.
So it's just less than 20%. But it's more than nothing. It's more than nothing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, this certainly has been an eye-opener, and this was well worth the time that we, as a board, had the opportunity to hear from both of you, Jason, and from Alan. It was a wake-up call for me immediately when you put up the slide, I believe, Alan, in regards to the mileage that our Hero units cover, the 380-plus miles. But the other thing that really caught my attention, that we have 159 of our Hero individuals working. Is that correct? On that 382 miles, 24/7, 365 days out of the year.
Flip back, Alan. That's where we desire to be and need to be. The actual number is like, y'all have to tell me the actual head count number. Go back to that slide. It's more like 60 people. That's why we're telling us.
Okay, so that wasn't an accurate number. You're telling us that's what you had to.
That's where we should be.
They're hoping to get to.
That's where we
With
should
the
be.
position.
And we've got 63.
And I was looking at the number of trucks, and even that number, I don't know how you feel the 143 trucks that you have out there. It sounds to me like you even need more people. And to me, this is a real wake-up call for our area. I know how proud we are when Champs got started 10 years ago, I believe it was, down to the rest of our state, and how people now are realizing the importance of having that program. They already were excited about the Hero units, because as I live on the coast, people were saying, where is our Hero units? So I want to let you know, while I have served through the public in regards to elected office and also on this GDOT board, that Hero units were very special as I approached Atlanta, Georgia. And I certainly want to see us stress what we can do. And if there's a way that some of us, when you are in the communities and would like for us to come show our support behind our Hero units, I certainly would be honored to be able to be there. And I'm sure the others, particularly in our Atlanta area, would be delighted to come, because I feel like it is such an important thing. It's certainly a huge safety factor when you see the Hero U out on the roadway that is there for us. And most of the time it's a distress time, like the commissioner was saying, when you're out there on the 85 or 285, I get upset just traveling 75 when I'm out there. But thank you for what you do, and thank you for this eye-opener today. I think it's very important that we carry this message to the other members of our board, and would be delighted to get a copy of some of this information put together. Maybe we could do some kind of information sheet where we're able to talk about what you do, and with so many that think that you have so many individuals out there working with you. And the retention rate is certainly important, but it's also getting those individuals in that are capable of following in your tracks and do what you do. So I thank you immensely, and we're here to help. All right, any other comment? With that, then, our committee of the whole stands adjourned, and I'll see everyone in the morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.